Welcome to Libeth. Today we are looking at the figures that populate Bushido, not as characters with lives, but as arguments wearing human form. There are no characters in Bushido in the way a novel has characters. There are types, forms of personhood that the samurai system was designed to produce, and the types are described through episodes that function not as stories but as proofs. The individual figures who appear in the text, and they are many, drawn from Japanese history and literature, exist not to be understood as persons with particular psychologies and particular life circumstances, but to demonstrate the operation of a system. They are the system made visible in a specific case. When Nitobe describes a samurai who maintained his composure while receiving news of his own death sentence, the point is not the particular man or the particular sentence. The point is what the system had made him capable of. The episode is evidence, not biography. The central type is the ideal samurai, and his defining characteristic is that he has resolved the fear of death. This is not a small claim. Nitobe treats it as the foundational achievement from which all the other virtues flow, and the philosophical logic of this priority is worth following carefully. A person who fears death will, at some point, allow the fear to govern his decisions. He will choose the option that preserves his life over the option that fulfills his obligation when the two conflict. This means that his loyalty, his courage, his rectitude, all of his other virtues, have a limit. They operate up to the point where they would require him to risk death, and then they collapse. They are conditional virtues. They depend on the circumstances, remaining within the range that the fear of death will tolerate. The samurai who has resolved the fear of death has no such limit. His virtues are unconditional because their ultimate cost has been pre-accepted. He acts freely in every situation because he has already reckoned with the worst. This is the move Nitobe makes explicit by comparing the ideal samurai to the Stoic philosophers, Epictetus, Marcus Aurelius, the men who built a philosophy of inner freedom on the premise that the only freedom available to any person is freedom over their own responses to what happens. External circumstances cannot be controlled. The judgment, the response, the attitude can be. Epictetus was a freed slave who found, in the total deprivation of external freedom, a philosophy organized entirely around the freedom that deprivation cannot reach. Marcus Aurelius was an emperor who found, in the total possession of external power, that the only power worth having was the power to govern oneself. Both arrived at the same position. The self-governed man is the only truly free person, because every other kind of freedom depends on circumstances that can change. The samurai and the Stoic are different cultural productions of the same insight, and Nitobe's comparison does real analytical work rather than mere rhetorical decoration. The 47 Rōnin are the book's central example, returned to repeatedly because they are the case that demonstrates the system most completely and at its most extreme. The basic facts are simple. Their lord was provoked into drawing his sword in the shogun's palace, a capital offense, and was ordered to commit seppuku. His retainers became Rōnin, masterless samurai, stripped of their position and their income. They dispersed. Over the next 2 years, they gave every appearance of having abandoned their loyalty. One of the most senior among them reportedly spent this period in such convincing debauchery, drinking in the lowest establishments in Kyoto, that a samurai from another domain approached him on the street, berated him for disgracing the samurai class, and spat on him. He accepted the spitting without response. The disguise required it, and the disguise required it because the vengeance required the disguise, and the vengeance was the completion of the obligation. In December 1702, the Rōnin gathered, attacked the residence of the official responsible for their lord's death, killed him, cut off his head, carried it to their lord's grave, laid it before the stone, and turned themselves in. They were ordered to commit seppuku. They did so without resistance or complaint. Nitobe presents this sequence not as a story about 47 individuals, but as a proof about one thing: what loyalty looks like when it has been followed to its logical conclusion without compromise or concession. The philosophical weight of the case lies in its temporal structure. The Lord was dead. There was no living person to whom loyalty was currently owed in any transactional sense. The retainers were not protecting him, not serving him, not fulfilling his present wishes. He had no present wishes. They were completing an obligation to an absence, sustaining a loyalty whose object no longer existed, maintaining a relationship with a dead man across 2 years of hardship and humiliation. The logic this reveals is the logic Nitobe considers most important. Loyalty in Bushido is not instrumental. It does not exist because it is useful, because it produces good outcomes, because the Lord deserves it by virtue of his ongoing qualities. It exists because the relationship is constitutive of the self. To abandon the obligation is not to make a bad decision. It is to become a different person, a person who once had that obligation and no longer honors it, which is to say, a person without the identity that the obligation constituted. This is why the 2 years of disguise and debasement are philosophically crucial, rather than merely dramatically interesting. The senior Rōnin who accepted being spat on in the street was not simply enduring humiliation in service of a tactical plan. He was demonstrating that the honor which constituted his identity was independent of its current social recognition. The community had withdrawn its recognition of him as an honorable man. They saw a dissolute drunkard, not a samurai. But the identity was maintained internally, sustained by the structure of the obligation itself, not by the community's current opinion. This is honor in its most demanding form, not the community's recognition of the person, but the person's recognition of the obligation, maintained even when the community has withdrawn its confirmation. The social infrastructure of honor had been removed, the internal structure held. And this distinction between honor as social confirmation and honor as internal obligation is the tension at the heart of the system, a tension that Nitobe describes but does not fully resolve. The figure of the Lord, the daimyo, is present in the book as the object of loyalty and is almost never examined as a subject. This absence is not incidental. The Lord deserves loyalty because he is Lord. His authority generates the obligation. The obligation does not require independent justification. This circularity is the system's foundation and its fragility simultaneously. If loyalty is owed because the Lord is Lord, because the relationship itself is the source of the obligation, then there is no external standard by which the Lord can be judged, no criterion by which a subject can decide that the Lord has forfeited the loyalty owed to him. The system has no mechanism for delegitimizing its own authority figures, and this is why it is structurally suited for political use by whoever occupies the authoritative position. Nitobe does not interrogate the circularity, because interrogating it would require asking whether the emperor deserves the loyalty that the Meiji state was directing at him. And And that question is the question the book is written to not ask. The transfer of the loyalty structure from the feudal lord to the emperor is the Meiji state's most consequential operation, and Nitobe's book performs it without acknowledging that it is being performed. In the feudal system, loyalty ran from retainer to lord, from lord to shogun, and the relationship was personal, grounded in specific bonds between specific persons within a specific community. In the Meiji system, loyalty runs from subject to emperor, and the relationship is impersonal. The emperor is an institution, a symbol, the apex of a loyalty hierarchy that encompasses the entire nation. The personal relationship has been replaced by an ideological one. The specific community that sustained and gave meaning to the original loyalty has been replaced by the abstract community of the nation-state. The vocabulary is preserved. The social reality that gave it substance has been transformed. Nitobe describes the vocabulary without examining the transformation. This is the book's central omission, and it is what makes the book available for uses he did not intend. The samurai woman appears in Nitobe's account as a figure of genuine virtue. He takes her seriously, admires her, devotes a chapter to her, but the seriousness is entirely framed by her function within the male samurai's story. Her virtues are endurance, self-governance, sacrifice, and the preparation of her men for death. She is not an independent ethical agent in the way the samurai is. The samurai's self-discipline leads to action in the world. The woman's self-discipline leads to the sustaining of the conditions for someone else's action. The ethical architecture is asymmetric, and the asymmetry is presented as complementarity rather than hierarchy. The woman's role is different from the man's, but equal in dignity, each necessary to the other, each complete within its sphere. This is the Meiji-era version of a gendered division of ethical labor, and it is presented as if it were simply the natural expression of Bushido's values, rather than a specific historical construction serving specific social purposes. The figure that holds the book together, more present than any samurai, any lord, any woman, is Nitobe himself. He is the translator standing between two worlds, making each legible to the other, and his presence is visible everywhere in the choices of what to compare, what to emphasize, what to leave in the shadow. His Christianity shapes the virtue structure. The comparisons to Christian ethics are not only diplomatic gestures toward the Western reader, they reflect his own faith, his own need to find in the Japanese tradition the equivalence of everything he valued in the Christian one. His Quaker sensibility shapes the portrait of the ideal samurai. The inner light, the self-governance, the moral life as its own reward. These are Quaker emphases as much as samurai emphases, and they appear in Nitobe's Bushido in ways that would have surprised Tsunetomo. His internationalism shapes the political argument. He needs Bushido to be universal enough that Japan can claim civilizational equivalence, while remaining particular enough that Japan's claim to distinctiveness has substance. The book is, among other things, an argument for Nitobe's own coherence, the demonstration that a Japanese Christian internationalist is not a contradictory figure, but a complete one. Whether the demonstration succeeds depends on whether you believe the tradition he assembled can bear the weight he places on it. That's all for today on Libeth. One new book every week. At least we try.